There's a whole lot of noise up there. Yeah, if it's not on Instagram, it didn't happen, Matashi. If it's not on Instagram,
4, 3, 2. All right, you're up.
All right, are we on air?
You are on air. And in a second,
Here
this
we
will-
go. Hello, everyone. Can you bring up the agenda?
Okay, meeting
I will.
starts. It's now 7 a.m. 7 p.m.
Anyone gonna come on mics?
Hello, everyone. This is AEVA New South Wales. So we're just getting ourselves ready, setting ourselves up, getting ready to go. We'll be another few minutes.
Ask to unmute. You don't.
No, don't. Let them be unmuted. Muted.
Oh, why don't we talk?
Can we just go down to the next on the agenda?
No, right.
Okay. So, hello everyone. Michael Day, Chair of AEVA New South Wales, also here in the studio, shall we call
Studio.
The office bed.
it? Jason Mead, who's Treasurer, John August, Vice Chair, and Mark Roberts, who is the Secretary. This is the second meeting of AEVA, so our first virtual meeting, so the last one being the physical meeting last month. The agenda today is in sort of two parts. Hopefully we'll have Luke Todd from True Green, who come and talk to us about the building buses in Mossvale, I think they are. Just waiting for him to come along. Also got Clive Atwater, who's the Vice President of National, AEVA National, wanted to talk a little bit about what's happening in National. And in fact, we might go to Clive quickly if Luke isn't with us soon. Then a late addition to the agenda is Jamie Lovick. We wanted to talk AEVA News because Jamie's got quite a thread going on the different social media links in and around AEVA and EVs. And so we thought we'd get him to distill some of the news that we've got. Talk about the branch updates, our plans for the next month or so. If we get to it, projects and any other business. So we'll just check to see if Luke's on the list, if Luke's here.
Unless he
Not
hasn't
thus far.
accepted the panelists or what?
Not thus far. Okay, so since Luke's not here, we might go quickly to Clive. Clive, are you there?
You have to unmute, right?
I tried to unmute it in the video before and you
Come on,
had,
unmute.
there we go. Okay. Michael, I've been running around all day looking at switchboards and charging sites, and I didn't do a preparation for National because I thought I said I was going to flip that back to you. So
Yes. But
I'm not prepared.
That's okay, because I did a little bit of thought about National. There's not an awful lot, I think you agree,
No.
right now for us to talk about. Okay, hang on.
We're still in the throes of trying to get some of the Constitution and organizational stuff rewritten, but that's kind of an ongoing dialogue between members and branches and some of our advisors. So I'm not sure that we've got a coherent thing to report on that, have we? I don't think that I've.
Don't. Yeah, although I'd say that I think you're right. We've picked up the energy and the pace a little bit. Now,
Yeah.
COVID and everything sort of kicked us around last year, but it's back on the agenda, so there'll be more from that soon.
Yeah.
The only other thing that really is sort of on the agenda, apart from the structure, which is coming, is Adelaide. So the plans for Adelaide, I think.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. So I think that's moving ahead. There's been some issues with the COVID uncertainties around planning a big event and how you manage risk for something where you're expecting an interstate attendance, and at the moment it's basically the what I call it, the cautious position is to assume that you might be stuck with only South Australian live attendees and maybe some Zoom type stuff, and trying to make the budget work with that, with the host sites that they're going to and other things. So it is it's been challenging. I think as the vaccine rolls out and things may stabilize, we might get some confidence back there. But I think the team managing that have got a good fix on what the issues are and the strategies available. It's not to say it's a perfect world though. Yeah.
And I have to say that if it all comes off the way that they hope, with the show the Try Drives, the conference, the dinner, the awards night.
Yeah.
It'll be one of the bigger ones if we can get everything to come together in the time available. Yeah.
And I think one of the things about the COVID risk issue and the interstate travel is that it means that you have to pitch harder to your local market, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think if we can get a large South Australian visitation to it, the fact that we don't bring a lot of AEVA members from across the country, we don't tend to see people attending these things who aren't members coming across the country. It tends to be mostly amongst the AEVA membership. So I don't think that'll cripple the event. Let's put it that way. It does reduce the number of people they can call on for manpower to man things on the day. But that's probably a modest impact. So yeah, it's going ahead, but in an interesting environment.
An interesting environment. They're saying that another thing that they're talking to Sally about the planning is they were talking if we had 4,000 to 5,000 people in Sydney, then they were talking about 5,000 to 10,000 in Adelaide if they could get it to come off. So
It's a competition.
it is. Well, that was it. Is what number did we have so that they could start to look at?
Well, it's a case of keeping the attendance at our conferences at a growth rate as fast as the number of EVs in Australia, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, keep up with the
So Clive, in the background of your thing, what is that map in your video?
Oh, there's two. There's the map,
Is that a
which
strike
is
map of all the places you're going to strike.
no, that's not. Sadly, I can't say that. It was. It's an antique, really. It's one of the early maps we did when fast chargers seemed to be too hard to get, and we were looking at where we put level 2 22 kilowatt chargers around the countryside. We've actually moved a long way from where that map is, and that's really a function of the fact that many of the new cars coming into market are longer range.
Which is
Are
probably
we moving into my presentation, or are we going to?
well, yeah, probably it's probably segue. And I mean, as we were talking before yesterday, wherever it was, the part of it was national to give another view because I mean, but you're an external view, another view from national, another voice. But also there'd been a discussion internally here in New South Wales about charge networks, and then I thought, well, Clive is actually instrumental in charge networks, and so can give us the 101 about what's happened, what you've done in Tasmania.
Yeah. So, am I on?
You are.
I am. Okay. Let's.
Are you going to share, or are you going to?
He doesn't have any.
No, I haven't got a formal presentation. I considered it, and I simply thought it probably wasn't necessary. But if there's some compelling thing that needs a visual support, I might be able to go find a file somewhere and open it. Look, I guess the first thing is to say it's been a long journey. We started the Tasmanian branch in 2015, and early in that process, we said, "Hey, look, we need to get around. How do we do it?" And I think, like all the states, it was opportunistic stuff. Hey, who do we know has got a PowerPoint somewhere you can use? Put it on PlugShare. We did get fairly early on a chocolate factory that decided it was a good thing for their visitors. They had a regular Tesla driver customer who said, "Hey, you can get a free Tesla charger," and they put in a non-Tesla charger alongside it. Cost them a fair bit of money, but that was one of the first public chargers, dedicated EV chargers, outside of things like the Nissan dealership and a few others around the state. They trickled out. There were still far more on PlugShare. There were far more PowerPoints than chargers for a long time, but that worked at that level. And so we fairly quickly hit 100 locations with some form of charging, many of which were Tesla chargers, I might note. The early Tesla chargers would charge any Type 2 vehicle. They didn't restrict them to Tesla vehicles. The later ones, they put on some software that limited that, and that obviously reduced the scope for sites that did that. But we fairly heavily lobbied to people who were putting Tesla chargers in to consider seriously putting a second one alongside, or even just a 15 amp PowerPoint alongside. While you got the electrician out there, it doesn't cost you bugger all to stick that in. So that was the first strategy, and that was a very opportunistic thing. It probably peaked over a period of about 3 years, but in parallel to that, as early as late 2015, oh, look at that, someone's on the ball. As early as late 2015, we were already forming what we called the Electric Highway Working Group, and that was to bring together RACT, Hydro, Aurora, TAS Networks, actually not Aurora, but TAS Networks, our distributor, and to bring in some representatives of local government areas. That we have 3 regional development authorities. You've got various other state authorities. I think you've got RTOs or something in New South Wales. Anyway, that represented a local government perspective. And we talked about, well, what would a charge network look like? And then we started to look seriously at, well, okay, it might be fast chargers, not level 2 chargers. And we looked at what the spacing should be. We thought that, and I had, by 2016, I'd driven to Adelaide and back in a Nissan Leaf, first generation Nissan Leaf, and said, look, that was fun. I enjoyed it. It was all very interesting, but it really isn't practical. We don't need to build a charge network for short range Nissan Leafs to get around the country because it's not a sensible thing to do for most people. So some people will do it, but they can use level 2 chargers because it's just not a realistic goal. So we started looking at, okay, so the next generation car is typically 200 plus kilometers range. Hey, what do we need? Well, we need to be able to charge to 80% and get to the next charger with a bit to spare. So we were looking at a typically 120 kilometer spacing around Tasmania on the main routes. So that's what we aimed for. Early in the piece, one of the participants said, well, look, okay, you've costed this out. If we gave you $2 million tomorrow, could you build it? And I said, no, we're not ready yet. Too much we don't know. I have the view, I've always pushed the view that it's better to do it right than do it fast. I did a trip to Europe, went to see charge networks in Ireland, Norway, Estonia, the Netherlands, went to see manufacturers in various countries, Spain, Circontrol and others, to find out more, because I was a new guy. I didn't know much, at that point. Learned a hell of a lot from people who were doing it and all the things they did wrong as much as what they did right. In Ireland, I learned that the EV Association was really busily working on an app to tell you where the charges were that actually worked and which ones weren't working on any given day.
Oh, right.
Because 16% of their charges, according to their statistics, did not work on any given day. That is unacceptable. If that's your network, it's failed. It's plain and simple. But that was an issue there. We looked at the implications of free charging and subsidized charging and blah, 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 and all the rest of it, and came back with some fairly strong views, which became incorporated into the Electric Highway Working Group's thinking. We didn't, we came to a plan in late 2016 to say, well, this is where we think the network would be, an initial network would be. And this is about what it would look like and what it would cost. Ideally, we wanted 2 chargers at each site, but we didn't think budget was going to provide that. And we were looking for that 120 kilometer spacing on all the main routes around the state. And I think it came out to about a dozen or so sites. And we kind of said, well, that's nice, but the cars that can use that aren't on sale yet. And they will be, we think, in 2018. Yeah, we think in 2018. So let's kind of think towards 2018 and we'll roll this thing out. We didn't know who or how we're going to roll this thing out, but at least we had an idea that's when it might happen. In 2017, state government had a grant scheme, which wasn't specific in any way to, not even vaguely related to electric vehicles. It was just they called it a local infrastructure grant scheme. But it had quite broad terms of reference and who could apply and what requirements were. It was a $1 matching grant. So if they gave you $1, you had to produce $1 of your own. We said, well, look, we could do some of this. And so we went to them and said, would we qualify? And they said, well, yeah, it sounds like a good project. Why don't you put in a submission? Oh, but if you did it, we were looking at just doing the main highway up the center of Tasmania from call it Hobart to Burnie.
Cool.
Because that's what we could afford, we thought, maybe. And they said, no. If you don't do the whole state, it's regional. We want to get investment in the regions. If you don't do the whole state, don't bother. Oh, all right. So we came up with, I think it was 12 sites that we thought we could do. We went to the local governments in question and looked for sites because we were generally looking at local government parking areas to put these in. And I think that was a good strategy, a sound strategy. We raised $500,000 to match the grant that we were asking for, and we didn't get it.
So when you did that, where did the money come from?
But you didn't get it either.
8 people. 8 people put their hands up. Really? Some for as little as $500.
Wow.
And some for a whole lot more. So, and yeah, you need willing investors. You need people to think that this might actually have some hope of getting your money back.
Yeah.
Never mind returns, but at least not losing it all.
Right.
But we pitched it very strongly on the basis that it is an extremely high risk, commercially priced and based, but with a good chance you'll never see your dollars back. So don't invest anything you're not prepared to lose. All right, so it's a pretty tough pitch to sell, because we can't guarantee that you won't lose everything. And there's lots of ways that could happen. But at the same time, we did it on a basis that if it works, you should make 15% return on your money, which ain't bad.
That's not bad.
And it's partly on the basis that we did expect a substantial capital subsidy. So you don't have to recover and depreciate the full value of your capital expenditure. And partly on the basis, and I think I'd like to emphasize this, that we, for every dollar we invest in capital development, that is chargers and electrical infrastructure and paving and bollards and all the other stuff that goes with it, we put 50 cents aside for losses in operating costs. Our estimate is that to run a site properly is between $6,000 and $8,000 per site per bay per year. Okay, and if you haven't got that money in the bank when you start, you're in trouble. And we need to budget to lose that amount of money or a declining amount over time as the business builds up. But we need to cover losses, we think, for, depending on the site, anywhere from 3 to 7 years.
Right.
And if you can't cover that, don't do it. If you can cover that, then you can wear a lot of stuff, okay, along the way. And you have to price. You have to price to meet that. And people talk about, oh, it should be cheap. It should be cheaper than petrol. It should be this. It should be that. No, it has to pay for itself, because if it doesn't, it's unsustainable. Now, you do have a subsidy, so that covers your losses, but it doesn't cover the fact that you've got to maintain those costs and make those returns. The other thing that, okay, so we didn't get the grant.
Right.
So we put the money, put the thing in. We had 500,000 promised, okay, but hadn't spent anything at the time we did the grant application. Didn't get the grant, and it was kind of like, oh, okay, well, it was a long shot. But we got 500 grand committed here. What are we going to do with it? Oh, let's see what we can do anyway. So we went back and pruned it back to the Midlands Highway route and started going back to all the local governments along that route. And we had some that were very resistant. Not really interested. It should be done on a private sector site. Put it in the Burger King's, parking lot or whatever. Some of them said, hey, well, this is interesting, and started exploring it. And the city of Launceston said, this is a really good idea. We'll do it ourselves.
Right. Oh, right. So
they just did it.
They just did it. Okay. So I presume that
they put a charger in one of their car parks in Launceston, and pretty much to what we would have specified. That's a 50 kilowatt charger and an AC charger alongside. It's in a city parking multi-story car park. Cost them $72,000, I think, and they got about 8,000 or 10,000 back from TAS Networks on the network supply charges, which they otherwise would have paid. So they got a bit of subsidy from that. But that was the first fast charger to go in the state. We had been talking to sites, some of which were petrol companies, because they'd come to AEVA early in the piece saying, hey, we're kind of thinking about these EV things. Should we put chargers in our petrol stations? And I spent a lot of time with them saying, well, if you did, this is things to think about, how you might go about it. And they jumped and put one in a second site in the state at Kempton, which is on the Midlands Highway, kind of towards the southern end, about a third of the way to Launceston, I suppose you'd say. So that was the second fast charger. And those were both done without any, there was a government subsidy program announced from TAS Networks, and that was announced fairly early in the working group's discussions. And what they said was, we will pay 50% of the upgrade costs for power supply to a site if the transformer needs an upgrade or something like that. We'll pay 50% of that cost if it is within, I think it was a kilometer of the center of Hobart, a kilometer of the center of Launceston, Burnie, or Devonport, or on the Midlands Highway between, and they specified a lower and upper point on the road. So the idea was to space the chargers out, and Launceston took advantage of that. The Kempton one didn't need to, because they were redeveloping their petrol station anyway. So that was
part of their investment.
So they didn't do it.
You've got the committee running, and you've got it's starting to get a bit of attention. You've got sort of two up and running, kind of almost by accident.
Well, yeah. I don't think you could say it was back by accident. But
No, there's a lot of energy for the time.
but we got him there. And then it was a case of we were working with Bernie. So Devonport said, no, we're too busy with this, that, and the other. They're doing a big redevelopment in the center of their city, and it just occupied their time. Hobart got hit by a big flood. I think it was 2017 or 18, I'm not sure now, but it was in the middle of winter, and it just wiped out a lot of infrastructure in the center of the city. City was up to its ears with all kinds of issues. So they were just not ready to talk. But Bernie said, oh yeah, this is a good idea. And Lawn System's already done it. And there's a bit of city rivalry, you know how it goes.
Well, as I was going to say, once you got Lawn System, did that start a bit of rivalry?
It gave it some credibility.
Yeah.
I think it did that. And then so Bernie said, okay, well, how do we do this? And I said, well, look, we're coming to you with a proposal, but at the end of the day, you need to do your due diligence as a local government and be seen to be fair dealing. The safest thing to do, if you're worried about it, is to go to a tender process. And you can invite anybody to come and put a charger in somewhere. And we'd already walked the city center and looked at all of their sites and looked at which ones worked and which ones didn't, and power supplies and stuff. It's not like it was a blank slate. And so they'd reached a point of saying, okay, it's one of these couple of spots. So then they could go to tender and say, we're looking for a charger in this part of the city or these parts. Who has an offer? And they got back a lot of people that wanted to sell them a charger. But we came back and said, we'll put it in and we'll run it and we'll cover the losses if you let us have it rent free.
Oh, right. Give us the location and we'll
give us the location. We'll stick it in. And furthermore, over time, we expect, but we want an initial single site. And over time, we will expand that. If you want some pictures, if you go in on, just click on the icon there, you get a picture of the site. But anyway, if you, we want a single site to start, but we want to be able to expand on all of our sites. We've made this a condition. We want to be able to expand to 6 to 8 bays. And the reason for that is it's better to have a few bays, a number of bays at one site than lots of individual chargers.
Yeah.
If you go to an individual charger and it's occupied or it's not working, well, you got to go find another one that's not occupied and not working, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you've got a whole bunch together, the chances of them all being occupied statistically are just that much lower. So it's just consumer convenience. There's also some economies of scale.
Well, I was about to say, then they're all in one place. So I presume the infrastructure is a bit easier as well.
Yes and no. There's a lot of regulatory crap that influences your decision. So, for example, you can get 100 amp service as of right for a fixed price. Doesn't matter what it costs TAS Networks to provide you. If you ask for 100 amps, they're obliged to provide it for a fixed price.
Right.
Okay, well, that's pretty good. If you go over 100 amps, it's a negotiated connection. And if it costs them 40 grand to upgrade their transformer, you're going to pay for it, or a big chunk of it. So staying under 100 amps is cheap, which is why in some countries and some networks in Europe have gone around looking for all that free or sites with capacity for 100 amps without having to go above every country's got different thresholds or rules, but they go around looking for sites that have got that, so you don't have to pay the network to upgrade the thing. They're paying for it. You pay for it in your pricing over time, but you don't have to find the capital. So there's a lot of distorting elements in it, and really staying under 100 amps is a really good strategy if you only want single 50 kilowatt charges everywhere. So, and we've done that so far. We don't intend to continue doing that, but we've done it so far. But what we did do is put in a switchboard that was capable of a lot more, a whole lot more. And we even put in a larger circuit breaker that you could dial down, and the network said, you could dial that up again, or we wouldn't know. Can't do that. So we had to pull out a bunch of big circuit breakers and put little ones in, even though the cabinet could take it, because we hadn't contracted for that much power. As it happens, we also told TAS Networks, and they've been very good. I'll give them credit. And in fact, Ted Lambert, who's our electrical designer, says they've probably been the best people he's ever worked with, nationally, that is. So that's been in our favor. But TAS Networks have always been told we're going to upgrade the station. So when they have upgraded the power supply, even just to supply, so we had one site that had 50 kilowatt single phase supply to a picnic shelter and barbecue and council rest area. And that's all they needed. It was way overkill even for that. But we said, well, we need 100 amps and you're going to have to pay for that. But we're going to be coming back in a year or two and asking for 300 amps. So they put a transformer in big enough for that. Right. Now they'll probably charge us when we ask to upgrade to that, but they won't actually have to do any work.
Yeah.
So we're 100 amp 3-phase, which we've committed, and now we'll go back to them in a couple of years when we need more power there and say, okay, we need bigger capacity. The wires are there, the transformers there. We'll pay a bill, but we'll pay it when we need it. So the deal was with the local governments: you give us a free site until we break even. How will you know that? You will know that because when we break even, we'll see an increasing demand curve and we'll want more capacity. And if we come and say, can we have another bay, please? Can we have another bay, please? You'll say, oh, you're making money. Well, not yet, but we're getting close. Okay, you pay rent.
Right. And so that's been not just for one council, but for several? 6 councils.
So far. Well, that's our 6 sites. Yeah. So on that, if you look at that, you can see Burnie, St. Helens, Swansea, Derwent Bridge, and Queenstown were all negotiated on that basis. So what happened was we got up to 2018 and the first 2 sites went in. We were negotiating with Burnie, and then the state government announced we've got a grant scheme for fast chargers. Now, I should note that during 2017, I guess it would have been, the state government established a working group that wasn't our electric highway working group. That had kind of done its job, come up with a plan and said, yep, that's what needs to happen, but none of us are going to do it. Okay. So that working group went to sleep. But what the state government did was then established a working group within the Tasmanian Climate Change Office, and that's their website, which had a much bigger 20 something participants, right? So I had the University of Tasmania, it had the Motor Traders Association, it's got other government agencies. We had Treasury sitting on there. That's a good one to get on your committee. We had state growth, we had tourism. So there was a really big representation. And we went in with that group, and we obviously said, look, until you have a network, a minimum skeleton network of fast chargers around the state, people say, why should I buy an electric vehicle? I can't go anywhere.
The old infrastructure.
And I said, don't overdo it. Only and be really careful in your terms of reference so you don't get 4 stations in one place and nothing somewhere else. Okay, you've got to make sure you cover routes. You've got to make sure it's spread out properly. So write your terms of reference the right way. Don't give them too much money. You need to make it so that they've got enough to survive, but not enough that they can be fat and lazy. They've got to put enough of their own money in to make it want to make it work. So they came up with a grant scheme. It ended up providing, that was interesting. It was written into the budget for $250,000, but it got written in by mistake twice. And it wasn't discovered until after the budget passed through the legislation, and so it ended up being 500,000, though it wasn't meant to be.
Through a typo.
But basically, or just an oversight in somebody's drafting of the budget, and everybody went, "Ooh, that's a good idea," because it had passed. The opposition was very supportive. We have the Liberal government down here, have had for a few years. The Labour and Greens have offered as much, I guess, towards EVs. I don't think particularly more. There's some reasons why that number didn't come out to 500,000, but that's another story. Anyway, we put in for 6 sites because we knew the city of Hobart was putting in for theirs, that AEVA was putting in for sites on the Midlands Highway, that Huon Valley Council was putting in for there. There was quite a lot that were put in that didn't get them as well. So we knew every submission because we talked to them all. We told them where to put it and how to do it, what they should cost to that. Okay, so it wasn't like any of this was a surprise. And in some cases, Huon Valley Council said, we might have you do it with us, or we might not. In the end, they decided to do it on their own. Fine. We don't mind that because it's a site, and if it's done properly, then that's good.
The infrastructure, part of the network.
Yeah. So our view has always been to try and get this network of, we said around about a dozen sites. It ended up, when we said we made it, we actually had 14 because there were probably a couple that you didn't really need on the Midlands Highway. It's over service relative to some other parts of the state, I would argue. But the point being that we did, the grant round came out. The grants that you just listed there were granted. We got 6 of them. And one of the reasons we got 6 of them, well, we put in for a bunch of places, obviously, but no, hang on, I backed it up. We got 5 of them. We put in for 6 sites, we got 5 of them. But most people put in for the full $50,000, which was offered. We actually put in for less than $50,000 on our sites because we didn't think we needed it. We think we needed enough to get us over the loss period that we could then recover and break even and make money. So we put in a different amount at different sites according to what we thought we needed to scrape through. And it's a big risk. We don't know if we're right. Okay, I think we are. So we got 5 out of 6, which was pretty good. And then Devonport got their own grant. And then they looked and shrugged their shoulders and said, this is hard. Why don't we get someone to do it for us? And it went out to tender. And we kind of said, hey, if you do that, we'll answer. So they did a tender. We answered. We made the best offer, which was exactly the same offer we made to everybody else, by the way. And they said, okay, so we'll roll the grant through to you guys. You're doing the work. You're putting equipment in. You're paying all the costs, and you'll cover the losses. So what we're offering them is basically a risk-free charging site. Cost them nothing because they passed the grant through. They end up essentially being on the same terms as the other sites that we initiated. That's ancient. That was like 2015's concept, so it moved on a long way from here. So we did Devonport, which is our 6th site. The site we applied for.
On something.
Say what?
It shows that you were working on something.
Well, yeah, I guess. The site that we applied for and didn't get is Smithton, which is in the far northwest. And at this point, we haven't proceeded with that. We got our 6 in. We got the last one in, was the second week of February, I guess. And that gave what we consider to be the first complete skeleton network of Tasmania.
And so and one of the questions coming up is, and probably I'm jumping ahead a little bit, is that what's the patronage right like? How's it performing now from a usage perspective?
All right, so there's a roundabout. Look, the numbers are rubbery because Tesla don't report their numbers, and the Good Car Company imports a whole bunch of used EVs from Japan, and they don't go in the Motor Traders numbers. And this.
Yeah, but we're talking about the usage of
your network.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is there's 450 cars in the state. We think roughly.
Oh, okay.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay, so 450 cars doesn't amount to a lot of usage. We know that. So the usage is actually slightly above what I had expected it would be at this time. And at the moment, I can say that the latest statistic is it's an average of 17 minutes per site per day. Okay, now our economics require that we get about an hour of usage per site per day to hit break even, to cover our operating costs. Now, we have a pricing structure which involves time and energy. 25 cents a kilowatt hour plus 25 cents per minute. And we think that's important because what it does is it gives people an incentive to use the equipment sensibly. They don't do that yet because they haven't learned, but that's okay. But if you sit there all day to try and get from 98 to 100%, it takes a long time to go from 80% to 100%. And frankly, it's expensive energy. It's expensive for us to deliver it to you. All right. So we'd rather you just went down the road and charged at the next one. It's actually faster. If you have the confidence that the next charger is there and available and working, then if you charge to 80% and then zip down the road, you'll get the power you need at the next charger when you're charging from 20 to 70%, a whole lot faster than that last 20% will take you. So your journey's quicker and it's cheaper.
It's cheaper. And
much cheaper.
Do you know what kind of people are using it? Is it largely domestic? I suppose there's people that are in the region that are using it as part of
it's not local. So by and large, you don't see postcodes appearing immediately adjacent to the charger. You do see some because some people just go down out of curiosity. Oh, I wonder how this thing works and plug in and whatever. But what you do see is a roundabout, and it varies a little bit by location and month, but we're seeing around about 25 to 30% interstate. So a lot of people are bringing their EVs to Tasmania because you can get around.
Over, yeah.
All right, they come down on the ferry.
And I know that's a deliberate thing that you focused on a lot is the
Sure.
travel.
Absolutely. It's the green tourism Tasmania
Tourism,
scheme.
is what I'm trying to say, yeah.
So, and of course, COVID's been an issue with that.
Hmm.
And there've been times when people have planned journey. Well, I know a lot of people who've planned journeys to come down to Tasmania in an EV or otherwise, and then the day before shut down, can't go, boom. So it could even be higher than that under stable conditions. We think it's seasonal. It'll be high in the summer and much less in the winter, we expect, but time will tell. But so we're getting about, as I say, 17 minutes a day. Our break even is about an hour a day. That covers costs. So we're about a third of the way, a bit less. So if you think of it, we expect patronage to vary roughly, and it'll be lumpy, but we think it might double every year as a number of EVs go up. And we think that once we have a network here that's robust, it's not yet robust, but it's getting better, then that will attract the cars onto the road, both local buyers, and we're seeing evidence of that, and more interstate visitors. So that's going to work in our favor. The thing that we are yet to do is to finish off the far northwest, so Smithton.
So
and
that's your next thing is expansion. Is
well, it would be. And the goal was when we finished our first 6 is, okay, then let's get on and finish the skeleton network as we see it, which is the far northwest, so Smithton. There's a place called Tulla, which is halfway between Burnie and Queenstown, if you know the place at all. That allows you to get into the Arthur Pymon and the Tarkine and all that stuff. There's a place called Miena, which is right in the dead center of Hobart, of Tasmania, up on the central plateau where the trout fishing and all that stuff is. And you can actually cross the central plateau now on paved roads. You couldn't do that 2 years ago. They had just finished paving it 2 years ago.
Right.
And so rental cars couldn't use it because they weren't allowed to go on gravel roads. But now they can. And so Miena is a key point. There's another place called Ooze, which allows you to get up to in the other parts of the central southwest more. And then the other one would be Dunalley, which makes the run to Port Arthur and back much more flexible and easy. So those 5 sites were our agenda for what's next. But then what happened was Nrma announced, 3 weeks ago? Lots of money. And it's got $400,000 for Greater Hobart, and it'll go to one organization that puts in the best coverage from a credible supplier. So you don't ignore $400,000. The other thing is that we are aware that although the network around the state is absolutely critical to uptake and credibility for EVs, the money's actually in the urban sites. That's where the cars are, their destination. Okay. I will say there's one exception to that, and that's Campbelltown, which is the midpoint along the Midlands Highway.
Right.
And it's just such a coffee break and toilet break place. You have to be there. We're not EVs there. But they got 2 350 kilowatt chargers. Cost them $750,000, fellas. So if you want to buy a couple of those, then that's what the price tag is.
Wow.
So we don't mind that they're there in a big way. But they should do well off that site in the long run. But we need to be in urban areas because all of our sites at the moment, except Burnie and Devonport, are pretty fringy, seasonal, difficult sites. Now they'll eventually the traffic will build up, but in the short run, they're really not going to make money, and they're going to be slower to make money than the urban sites are. Right. So the opportunity to get some sites up in Hobart, Greater Hobart, is a good one. It wouldn't have been our priority. Our priority would have been to continue to finish the network in the regional areas.
And that's what I was going to say, because I thought that in the urban centres wasn't the most popular because we charge from home, so to speak. But but
the people that charge in Hobart come in from the outside areas.
Oh, they drive.
So they come in, they want to do some business and go home.
Right.
Okay. Or they're tourists that have come to Hobart and then they want to go on to somewhere else. Yeah. So the market but the point about a big city attracts more people in. That's why it matters, rather than that's the locals that are using it.
Has Tritium offered you any deals because you're a not-for-profit?
We are for profit.
I just wanted to see what he'd say if he was for profit. Anyway,
no, we're not a not-for-profit. No, I don't think they would. We do okay because we buy chargers by the half dozen. We actually have 2 spares. One for the Smithton site that we didn't put in because we thought we'd go ahead with that anyway. And the second one, we actually bought a spare Tritium 50 kilowatt charger because if somebody runs into one of our chargers with a truck and bends it and kills it, it's 8 weeks delivery to get a replacement.
Really?
We can't be off air that long. That would be crap service. We can't do that.
And that is a question, because now you've got the physical assets, but and you've got the business that runs it, and it's early days, but then you've also got the operations to have to manage it in terms of billing and in terms of running. And
Well, that's ChargeFox. So we commission ChargeFox to be our back end and billing and customer support. So that's a significant part. Now, having said that, they identify issues, but they don't have the electrician to go fix it. Okay, so yes, we still have an operational role, and it's an important one. So far we've had 2 internal circuit breaker trips, which you can't just reset. You need an electrician to go out.
Right. Yeah.
And we've had one of our credit card readers smashed, vandalism. So we budget $1,500 per site per year for maintenance, recognizing that many years we won't spend that, and then other years something will happen and it's going to cost us $5,000, right?
Yeah.
So you look in the long-term statistical likelihoods of stuff, and you work out that's some sort of budget, which may be totally wrong 5 years from now. You might say, well, that was overkill, or it was not nearly enough. We don't know.
Start somewhere.
But we have insurance. So if an incident costs us more than $2,500, then the insurance comes in. Under $2,500, we just cover it.
Have you had a look at the new Tritium charger that they released only like 3 months ago?
We look at all the chargers. We're looking at Tritium, but we're looking at ABB. We're looking at everything. I say everything. No, there's some we won't. But we're constantly scanning that. And we're also always looking at any charger. We look at it as much as anything. We're interested in upgrade paths. So we don't think that the chargers we install after the 50 kilowatts will probably move to a configuration where, although it may have anywhere from 75 to 100 kilowatts capacity as we buy it, it's got the capacity to upgrade to 150 to
That's
180.
the modular design that they're trying to sell.
Yeah. And all the manufacturers are heading that way. I think it's probably fair to say, some more aggressively than others.
And that's the thing, the traditionally you think that you've got 50s now, but you're thinking that it's going to get bigger and bigger, faster. And
Oh, absolutely. Already we're seeing probably 2/3 of the vehicles that come to our sites could take more than 50. That's not to say that it makes a big difference to the charging time.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And it doesn't. But the expectation is, if you buy a car that can charge at 120, that you'd like to have at least 75 or 80, not 50.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, and look, there is an advantage in faster chargers up to a point, in that it provides a higher productivity for your site. You get more power out to more vehicles in less space and time. So there's economies that come with that. So you can provide cheaper charging effectively by doing that. And the second thing is that there's a ceiling to that. And that is really, when do you need cooled cables? So when you go above, and it depends on who you listen to, somewhere between 125 is the low end estimate, up to about 175, which is the high end estimate, you can get away with a passively cooled cable and connector. And at the top end of that range, you find that the chargers sort of sensing the temperature in the cable and the connector, and they'll back off the power level if they get too hot.
Protect themselves.
So it's a passive protection. And if you go above that range at 400 volts, then you have to have actively cooled chargers and connectors. And that's got a fluid flow, very much more complicated, very much more prone to failure, more expensive. So I'm not a fan of that, but I do know that the newer cars at some point will probably switch to an 800 volt architecture. And when you go to an 800 volt architecture, that current flow comes down for the same power. So that ceiling will probably lift to maybe 250 kilowatts.
Right.
Maybe less. But so we'll need to move with that, because customers will expect it. And it's good economics. So we'll probably see the next generation of chargers that we put in. Well, under the Greater Hobart grant from Nrma, we actually have our hands tied. We have to put in capacity to charge 2 vehicles at a minimum of 50 kilowatts. And one of the economic solutions to do that is to put in a charger that's capable of doing, say, 150 kilowatts to 2 vehicles. But if one vehicle turns up, it can do 150 to one vehicle. So you all of a sudden have quite a high power available to some cars that can use it. But if you look at the charge curve, and every car's got its own, every brand and model's got its own charge curve, they're kind of sort of almost a spike, depending on what axis you use. But the time they spend at their peak for most of them is not very long.
Right.
There is one that's an exception. I'm just trying to remember. Is it the e-tron? One of the expensive German ones, anyway.
Bigger batteries.
Actually has a very high and flat curve that only dives down about 85 or 90%, and then it comes down real hard.
Papers.
But most of them, you have a lower charge rate when you're below about 20% state of charge, and it builds up and it hits their peak, and then it comes down, starts descending anywhere from 40 to 60% state of charge, and then past 70 or 80%, typically they go down much faster. So you have to look at that charge curve and say, well, how long are they going to spend there? And it's not how long in state of charge, but how long in minutes. And if you compress that into a minute scale instead of a state of charge scale, the fast charging goes through its state of charge real fast. So you end up with a situation that's almost like a pointy spike in terms of energy versus time. And so they don't spend a lot of time in those really high charge rates. And because of that, you can put in a charger that delivers 150 to 2 cars. And one of them comes along and says, oh, I can use 140 of that or whatever. Yeah, for 5 minutes. And then they're back down into the 90s and whatever. And the car next to them is still getting 60, 70 kilowatts. So that's the sort of, which is what Tesla's always done with their charge stations. It's not new, guys. We're just catching up.
Right. They figured it out because they're doing it at scale, and they've
done so much stuff right. I'm not a Tesla owner, and I don't own shares, so I have no commercial interest. But Tesla have done an awful lot of things right. And if you just imitated them, you wouldn't be badly off.
So that was the last thing, because we probably should wrap up a little bit, but consumed plenty of your time. Unless there's other questions that pop up. If anyone's other questions, just let us know in the chat. The last kind of question I had was what kind of competition do you have in the state? Because we've seen there's a few others out there. So you're probably not the only one in town. There's obviously Teslas, but there are others.
Sure. Well, there's no Tesla superchargers for start.
Is there really?
No.
Oh.
We think there will be. We think we even know where it's going. We think we even know when it's going to open, but I can't tell you that.
You know why they haven't come yet? They just didn't see the demand.
It's hard to say. I can think of a number of reasons, but I think it's small and seen as parochial. I think they've been surprised by the Tesla sales down here. Yeah, we've done been a pretty reasonable market for them. Yeah. But we had when we opened our site in Swansea, we were the 14th on that map. There's now, by the way, since we opened our charge in the middle of February, 3 new sites have opened in Tasmania. So there's now 17 fast charge sites. But when we opened that one in Swansea, we said, okay, we now have a decent network that covers most of the state. We don't cover the far northwest adequately, but other than that, you can go pretty well anywhere in Tasmania if your car has a 200-kilometer real range on the highway.
Yeah.
If you drive slower, you can get it to the far corners, but that's squibbing it. Anyway, so when we opened that up, we invited every charge network operator and site to a launch in Launceston, which the Premier came and did. Yep. And we said, this is the day we can say you can go anywhere in Tassie with a fast charger. So we had all the brands there. We had their logos up and whatever else if they came with them. Some didn't bring any. And Huon Valley Council was there, and Hobart City Council had a guy. So, I mean, there were people from all the branded sites and the non-branded city local sites, etc. And we said, this is about Tasmania's network. So there isn't a sense in which we compete. The sense in which we all agree is by having a statewide network, we're all going to see more EVs on the road, and we're all going to get more customers.
Headed together.
Together, yeah. And there is an element of competition. So there's different pricing, different charge rates, different levels of convenience, and how good the coffee is where they are. Yeah. Okay. And don't knock that as a point of differentiation or significant choice. But the reality is, if you're driving up the East Coast, you're going to come to one of our sites because we're the only ones there. Yeah. If you're driving up the center, there's a bit of competition. But there's a bit of competition, and EV have said on several occasions now, Campbelltown is, of their sites in Australia, the busiest site they have.
Wow.
All right. And ChargeFox are finding that the Kings Meadows one's pretty good too. So that's in Launceston, a suburb of Launceston. So we're doing pretty good in terms of patronage. The reality is, once that skeletal network is up, we think the sales growth will be strong of cars, for obvious reasons. Obviously, the more cars on the market and the cheaper and variety, there's still not decent SUVs and utes and all that stuff, which is big market shares. But we still think we'll see strong growth. I believe that the problem will be, once we finished our last few regional areas and all the rest of it, the problem will be building capacity fast enough to keep up with demand.
Right.
And the people who are charging a fee, which represents cost recovery when you are at a level of strong demand. So when those chargers are busy, will be able to reinvest with some confidence and with some cash flow, and they'll just simply fill up and meet that need without hesitation. And the ones that aren't charging enough will have to raise money, wait for a grant scheme, or put their prices up.
Yeah.
And that will lead to a backlash, as we've already seen in a number of places overseas.
Yeah. That was a thing. We talked about that at some stage, the pricing.
Yeah. So our prices are the second highest in Tasmania, but we believe they're sustainable. We may prove that our budgets have been unduly conservative and we can do it for less. Well, that's great. We charge 25 cents a kilowatt hour plus 25 cents per minute. And if you have a vehicle that can charge at close to the 50 kilowatt provided, and most of the time it's 46, 47, 48 kilowatts, even if you've got a car that can take more, just because that's how it is. But if you're charging in the 45 plus kilowatt range, and you're charging in the state of charge where you're maintaining that for most of the charge cycles, in other words, you're not charging out much past 80% up to 100% where it's really slow, your cost per kilowatt hour delivered in the high 50 cents, low 60s, depending on conditions. So, yep.
August here, just wondering, what do you mean by the backlash? I'm not terribly familiar with that.
They put their prices up, they're too expensive, I'm going somewhere else.
Yeah. So there was I can't remember which network it was. There was someone, maybe it was Queensland or someone that had done pricing. It was reasonably cheap. They figured out that it wasn't good enough. They changed their pricing and there was a backlash. That's the... Yeah,
but now that will generally pass, but a lot of companies resist doing it because they know that's going to come. And it's kind of like, oh, we're going to piss a lot of people off and they'll go to the other people. Now in Tasmania, at the moment, there's not so much, apart from the Midlands Highway, there's not so much competitive tension between sites that matters. Okay, if you want to go up the east and west coast, you don't have a choice. But we're not, how can I put it? We're not trying to take advantage of that and put our price up. If we were on the Midlands Highway, our price would be the same as it is. So, but it is a case that for on the Midlands Highway, Mood Food's $1 a kilowatt hour, flat, no time charge, it's just $1 kilowatt hour. That's the most expensive in Tasmania at the moment, and they've had a drop in turnover as a result.
Yeah. So interesting question here from Daryl. He's asking about UK as an example. 90% of charging done at home. So that's true.
Absolutely.
And it would be the same in Tassie, I'm sure. Asking about urban versus motorway charging. So from what you've described here, a lot of it's on the main arteries. And if it's urban, it's the people that are using it are coming into the main centres and using it as sort of a destination. The reason to come in the cities, to
do something.
Yeah.
And while they're there, they plug in and do their thing.
Yeah.
And so this is the other thing about faster charging. If you charge faster than a certain rate, and again, my argument, it's probably in the high hundreds, 175-ish or whatever. If you sustain that for a length of time, and you get the charging time down, as the Germans have been trying to do, I might add, very actively. But if you get to the point where you're charging, the amount you need to charge takes you less than 6 minutes, you won't leave your car.
Wow.
Right? Why would you? By the time you get anywhere, you got to come back again because it's full.
Yes, it's kind
so
of too
any time saving under 6 minutes is a waste of time. You're better off to say, okay, it's going to be 10 minutes. I'll go get a coffee, go take a piss, whatever, and I'll come back when I'm done because it'll be about right. But if it's under 6 minutes, I can't be bothered to go anywhere because I got to come back and unplug it and leave anyway.
Thanks.
So there's really, I don't think, any consumer benefit in going under 6 minutes for the vast majority of situations.
Clive,
And-
another thing is that at least Roads and Maritime Service New South Wales, they're recommending a break every 2 hours, and it depends on how long is a break. In a sense, if you make these pauses too short, you're actually undermining those sorts of
Correct.
desires by the regulators.
Yeah, now I'm an old guy and my bladder will only last me 90 minutes. So
I was going to say that 2 hours is about my range when it comes to.
So 90 minutes and I'm ready for a loo, and I have another coffee and I'll be ready for a loo in another 90 minutes. But yeah, the reality is that it's not a bad tempo to drive for 90 minutes to 2 hours. 2 hours is fine. Much beyond 2 hours, and you kind of say, well, are you human or not? And how driven are you in your life? But if you can make it so that it's a 10 to 15 minute break every couple of hours, even Sydney to Melbourne, that's not a bad rhythm. And you'll arrive probably more rested than if you just barrel on. You might get there a little sooner if you barrel on, but hey, and we're also dealing with Tasmania here, folks, from one end to the other. If you start at the very bottom and you go all the way to the far corner by the longest route, it's 800K. You don't do that very often.
Yeah,
no one does that.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Clive. I think we've dominated a lot of your time. That's been really helpful, really interesting. Thank you very much.
Well, and the story's still going, so lots more to come. But yeah, glad to have an opportunity to share a bit. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Bye.
So I don't think Luke's
No
not with us. So I might try and chase him. So it means, Jamie, if you're there.
I am indeed.
So this is a new segment. Interesting, Jamie. I'm not sure how this came up as a topic, but John.
Okay, well, I have to say I was the person who was suggesting it. I noticed that Jamie was basically posting a lot of stuff to Facebook, had access to a lot of articles and stuff. And on the one hand, it's a bit overwhelming trying to keep track of what Jamie's up to. But I thought, given his interest and enthusiasm, getting a 5-minute report, what's going on in the EV world, I just thought that would be a useful contribution to our meeting.
So this is a new segment.
That's why I suggested it, and Jamie's been happy and Michael's been happy.
Jamie's EV segment. Go.
Yes. Go. Yes. So thank you, guys. As they mentioned, John sort of basically pinged me last week and it's like, oh, will you do 5 minutes in this? Okay. Yeah, happy to do it and happy to try to make it a regular segment. So as John mentioned, I tend to always sort of find and be posting articles on Facebook and stuff, but equally, I'm interested in hearing what everyone else wants to hear. You may or may not sort of see me posting to the AEVA Facebook page and various other bits. But since the topic of the evening seems to be charging, I thought I might touch on probably late last year. You may have heard about Jolt Charge that has done a deal with Osgrid to actually sort of start rolling out EV chargers where there's transformers. While there hasn't been a lot of progress in Sydney, it appears that
oh, Jamie's gone. You've gone on mute.
He's muted himself.
Have you muted?
Yes.
Go back. Go back.
Back. Okay.
Watch carefully what you bump. You're obviously very excited and you're bumping your elbows against things.
I know. I went to flick screens on my laptop. So anyway, yeah. So the Jolt Charge are basically starting up nationally, and I apologize for the background noise. And I started setting up a few sites in Adelaide that should be sort of set up in the first quarter of this year. Hang on, excuse me. There we go. The sirens can go away. So at this stage, they've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, about 16 sites. They're looking at getting set up in Adelaide. And, obviously this would be useful for when we do the national meeting down there. But they're all sort of, at the moment, the few active ones are on the main arterial roads, sort of south of the city, sort of northwest of the city, northeast of the city.
Sort of on the routes leaving.
Sorry?
On the route, sort of on the routes leaving the city.
That's right. That's right. Adelaide. I'm an Adelaide boy myself, so Adelaideans tend to be a city of drivers. They don't use public transport a lot. Generally, that's relegated to kids going to school and pensioners or people that don't drive. So it makes sense to put them on the main roads out of the city, and it's sometimes challenging to actually find spots within the CBD to do so. There are a few sort of council-based charges there, and a lot of the councils in Adelaide have and put those in various shopping centre car parks. But yeah, unfortunately, no progress on Sydney as yet that I'm aware of.
So but they're in Adelaide, but you're saying that they are talking about Sydney. Is that what that the case?
Yeah. So there was a post. Sydney Morning Herald ran an article, and it was also posted about the same time in December, I think it was, to the AEVA website. We're basically mentioning that Ausgrid and Jolt, even though they're sort of a startup in Sydney, they're actually planning on rolling out nationally. But if you go to joltcharge.com or jolt.com.au, you can actually sort of find out info about that. I was actually off for work this week, sort of out in Dubbo in Western New South Wales, and looks like they've actually got a new EV charger out there that sort of rolled out towards the end of last year. That's the Nrma fast charger, and I'm sure we've all sort of been following that sort of fairly closely. It's good, actually. There's a couple of destination chargers out there as well. I stayed at the Blue Gum Motel, and they've got a couple of Tesla chargers. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if they are opened up for other vehicles. A few other sort of things that may be of interest. I know a lot of the members are interested in conversions. I don't know if you've sort of heard of the company Lithium Power. They're sort of based in Perth.
Leon.
Yep, that's the one. Yeah, he's been sort of fairly active on social media, and that they've got some pretty good pricing, actually, I think, on the Nissan Leaf 24 kilowatt packs, the Generation 1. Now, that on average, they're sort of saying they're at least 60-70% capacity, in all likelihood, probably more. But yeah, the sticker price on those at the moment is about $3,500. But I think if you have a chat to him, he'll actually do free postage on it.
Do you know where he gets his stock from? I never bothered to ask.
I did have a chat to him sort of a couple of months ago, and I believe he's pulling a lot of them in from overseas.
So I bought my Tesla motor from him. It was one of those things, right price, right time. I didn't bother to ask where he got it from. So,
do you think it's stolen?
No, I just think completely to Jamie's point that he's got quite a bit of stock at the moment, and some interesting things. There's Tesla packs, there's other things, but quite a few of the Leaf packs.
Well, your Tesla motors are for sale right now, isn't it?
Well, not at the moment, not unless the wife forces me to. That's a different question.
Additionally, I don't know if you're aware of the EV Alliance, which are a sort of a lot of EV conversion shops around the country.
When are coming up in the not too distant future?
It was last night.
Was it?
Yeah, there was one last night, but they're actually starting to do that on a regular basis. So
and if you look at the list, I mean, it's the who's who of the converters. I noticed it was a really good list of people that are in that biz.
Yeah. Some of the guys. Sorry.
Did you listen to it? Or did you listen to their webinar?
Yeah. I tuned in last night and had a chance to have a listen to the stream. It was a little bit of Q&A. The sessions are generally sort of, sometimes they'll feature a particular sort of person's conversion or some of their own work. Last night was, normally he goes by Alex. He's just recently started going by his actual name, Mark. Mark Ross, who some of you may or may not be familiar with. He kind of organises the Facebook group All EV Parts Australia. He's Brisbane based, and he's quite passionate about, just like all of us, trying to get people sort of into EVs, or particularly sort of make conversions accessible. So he spends a remarkable amount of time, way more time than I feel I have time with sometimes, posting, sort of crashed Teslas, electric vehicles, whatever, on the various auction sites such as, Pickles, Grays, Mannerheim. So yeah, and it's not just Brisbane. He looks at that. He actually sort of posts national ones as well. I tend to post a fair bit on there if I find things. Like, for example, there's some little Mitsubishi IMEVs. There's 2 on the market at the moment on car sales. One here in Sydney, which the guy apparently will take 10.5 if you ask him. It's currently up for 12. And there's another one in Melbourne, and as well as the usual slew of Leafs, probably starting at about $15,000 up. There's some interesting stuff going on out there at the moment. I recommend have a look at the EV Alliance. They've got a YouTube channel. Last night's stream is already up there on their YouTube, and that'll be going on a regular basis once a month. Hang on, I'll post when I get a chance the actual schedule for that one. They will probably post something. I think MS Sutcliffe organises a lot of that online stuff for them. Let's have a look. Probably some international news. There's quite a few EVs coming to Australia this year. A lot of them are probably towards the top end of town, but we can hope we're actually, the more options, the better. So the e-tron GT, which Audi has just released, that should be hitting our shores towards the end of the year. Well, they're saying third quarter 2021 is the current estimate. There's a Bmw Ix coming as well. That's kind of, chunky SUV, a bit like an X5 or an X6, with the new sort of kidney grille that looks like it's trying to snort its way down the road. The BMW, I think it's the X3, which is basically their 1 Series sort of jacked up. They're actually releasing an electrified version of those. That should come to Australia about mid-year. Hopefully the Mark E should hit our shores as well, probably for the $60,000 mark, and that should be sort of late towards the end of the year. And there's also refresh Kona Electric coming as well. The Ioniq 5, that's probably going to be end of 2021, and it's Kia branded sister. Oh, actually not the Ioniq 5, but the Kia branded sister of the Kona. The e-Nrma is also hitting the shores this year. So there's going to be a lot of EVs coming into the country. Most of them, in above $50,000 bracket. But we're going to start seeing a lot more on the road, which is a good thing. Anyway, I've been waffling on for probably more than 5 minutes.
That's okay. We had a bit of a technical glitch, so that was good cover. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was looking on the other screen.
Another thing I'll mention, you were talking about Dubbo. I know Chris Darlitz says the devious group around Dubbo. So there's a definite EV group around Dubbo, and we occasionally see Chris Darlitz, and I know he was one of the people behind that EV parade around the screening of Ford versus Ferrari at Manildra. So there's definitely EV presence around Dubbo. So that's sort of worth noting.
Yeah, I was on the road for a couple of hours today between Dubbo and Orange, and actually saw a couple of Model 3s out there as well. So yeah, there's definitely some in the regions, and the popularity is growing. They don't seem to be scared about the fact that there's some distance between each town. But I guess since John sort of tapped me on the shoulder for this one, if anyone has any questions or anything they'd like to see, rather than me just randomly waffling on, please feel free to either, comment on this when this hits YouTube, or post in the AEVA sort of Facebook group or forum, and I'll try to cover anything that anyone's looking at or wants to look.
Well, anyway,
Thank you,
Jamie,
Jamie.
thanks for that. I think it's added something to the meeting, so thank you. Yes.
Oh, no problem.
Well, have you got the agenda back, just so I can? Because I think the next thing from us. So I'm guessing that Luke from True Green is not going to join us this time, so unfortunately, but I'll chase him hopefully for next time. So the next thing that we wanted to sort of to let you know was the upcoming meetings. So on the 28th of March, it's the drive up to Charles's place at Hartley. There is a post on Facebook, and I'll make a note to myself and I'll send out an email to everyone on the details. That'll probably be tomorrow or the next day if we can. Then on the 14th of April, it's the standard Borkham Hills Sporting Club meeting, another physical meeting. And then the 30th of May, we're thinking about, we will be at Cronulla Cars and Coffee. So they're back on, the car shows are back on. And we've asked for the Cronulla group, well, they've suggested that they'll give us a slot. So if you're interested, let us know, because we'll have our own parking area and a place to put cars, and hopefully we'll be there in a little bit of force.
And Jamie's out.
Or 14th of April. Anyway.
14th of April. So the last two things were any other business. So if you've got any other business, now's the kind of the time to post. And unless there are any, well, if it's anyone got any projects, I mean, I was going to talk through my project again, in case you haven't seen it. I did present it last time at the physical meeting, but I wondered if people here that weren't there wanted to see it, I can talk about that. But if you have a project or something you want to talk about now, raise your hand, let us know, because we can give you the floor.
If nobody else jumps up, I'm happy to talk about my import experiences of some motors.
If you go now, and if anyone else, you go, Jamie, and if anyone else wants to put their hand up, we'll put you up next.
Okay. So as we all know, finding EV motors isn't cheap. So I thought I might challenge myself to see what options are available. A lot of Australian wreckers, particularly of hybrids and things like that, they tend to put a premium on the, selling parts here in Australia. So even though it's not directly EV related, I'm a bit of a watcher of Mighty Car Mods, and one of their preferred importers is Import Monster. So I had a chat to the guys from Import Monster to ask, what potentially I could bring in and what I couldn't bring in. And it ends up that bringing in motors is relatively easy. So I sort of then went through their website, had a look at Yahoo Auctions in Japan, in which they've got their own sort of little redirect, which does translation to English and makes the process quite easy to do. The Import Monster import process is a matter of you give them, you add credit, you create an account on their site, you add some credit to it, you go shopping on Yahoo Auctions, and if you win, they take over and actually sort of handle the internal shipping from Japan, and then actually sort of bring it back to their Melbourne warehouse. It's yahoo.importmonster.com.au, that's correct. And it's a slow process depending on how you bring it in. If you're looking for a small part, you can do international freight relatively easy. They'll sort of air freight it. If it's something a bit larger or heavier, I ended up sort of getting 3 motors, and they hold them and then sort of chuck them on a container for sea freight. A container typically goes about once every month or two. So I started the process, I think, in October last year, and managed to get my motors here in Sydney in January. So
and you've got quite a collection now. You've probably got 3 or 4 motors.
Only three. I sort of focused on the Outlander PHEV rear motors. If you go into, you've got your sort of sections in the left. Oh, okay, you've gone off. If you go into automotive and then parts, next one down, yep. And was it car parts? And then clutch transmission and diff. So if you're looking for something that is, say a standalone hybrid motor, like in the Outlander PHEV or in the rear of a Lexus RX450H, if you search for PHEV, generally you'll find something. But the rear motors tend to be classed as a diff. So when you're searching, you want to go look for it as a diff, not a motor. So if you search for PHEV in the search box there, you already have, sorry. Yep, you've got it. So you'll find there's a few options there from various sort of JDM, Toyota vehicles, Mitsubishi vehicles. They do have, you can also find Nissan Leaf motors. They tend to be, in my opinion, a bit overpriced. They're probably not that much cheaper than you'd buy one here in Australia from a wrecker, which is, $2.5 grand kind of mark. But if you look at the hybrid gearboxes, which, if you've got a method of controlling them, and the method I'm sort of looking at is going the open inverter kind of route. It's a pretty kind of long-term project for me, though. I'm not in any rush. So I'm just sort of collecting bits over time. But price-wise, the three motors I got, which is two of the Outlander rear motors and one of the RX450H rear motors, probably was roughly $350, $400 each delivered. I did have to go to basically a warehouse in Sydney to pick it up. Because they put them up on a pallet. They can't really sort of deliver it to your house unless you got a way to lift it off the truck. So I'm lucky that I have a little Volkswagen Caddy van, and fitting a small pallet in the back isn't too hard. Also along the way, I bought a rear inverter for the Outlander PHEV, charge cables, battery cables. So got CHAdeMO port and J1772 port. Just because I figure that they're going to be useful. It's probably on par, if not a bit cheaper, than actually getting them locally. Particularly the CHAdeMO ones. The CHAdeMO ones tend to be a bit more expensive. So getting a used one out of an Outlander is actually a cheaper way of doing it. Even though I don't currently have a way to kind of control it, but there are projects working on that. But I've had a couple of other people on the All EV Parts Australia group. There was a guy in Melbourne who explained the process through, and he's actually gone through and bought in a Lexus GS450H gearbox, which is like a rear-wheel drive one. It's another one that Damien Maguire's done from EV BMW and used for his rear-wheel drive conversion. He's doing one on a truck, and Mark Ross is looking at doing something similar up in Brisbane.
Well, good.
Anyway, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ping me.
So again, if anyone's got any other,
there's
a project. There's a question. Who's got their hand up? Daryl.
Yep, that's me. Actually, the camera's off at the moment, so can you hear me?
We can. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Okay, it's not a project, but for the past couple of months, I've been doing a course on EVs through the European Centre for Technology, which is the EU training arm. And that course covers technical, it covers policy, and it covers business. And whilst there's not a lot of technical, there's a lot of policy. And when you see the UK EV policy and you see the EU EV policy, and just the UK has created a whole new office of government called OLEV, the Office of Low Emission Vehicles. you realise what a bloody long way we've got to go in Australia to even get there.
And
The
do you
two-
have access to those documents, just by the way, those policies, the EU and the UK?
I do. Well, it's actually summaries of policies. Let me just see if I get this camera. I don't understand why my camera's turned off. It looks like it's turned off on your side. But anyway, so it's summaries of the policies, but just looking at the proposed rollout of low emission vehicles, and the two people running the course were the ones that were the consultants on the initial charger rollout in the UK in 2010.
Right.
So these two people know exactly what the UK went through in rolling out chargers. And when you look at the proposal from OLEV in terms of what the vehicle, what the composition of the UK vehicle numbers will be over the next 10, 15 years, and you see how they're moving gradually through hydrogen to battery and that kind of thing. It's really fascinating. And you look at this and you think, if we're just starting now, it's going to be, even if we use the UK as a base for EV policy in Australia, and a lot of it doesn't apply in terms of Australia and the distances and that kind of thing. But when you see it, you think, how are we going to do it? How are we going to get policy in government in enough time to be able to roll out EVs in 5 years even?
Well, interestingly, one of the reasons I'm interested in those policy documents is literally next Wednesday, I've been invited to New South Wales Treasury to talk about policy on EVs for New South Wales.
Okay,
So,
look, I will send you the links to the UK sites.
perfect, thank you.
Okay, and so you can see, but when you see their EV policy in terms of how the EVs are rolled out and this kind of thing, it is just, it's overwhelming in terms of
Probably
the volume.
to what we're looking at. So, yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, the reason I pointed out is that, well, I got invited, so that's pretty cool. But we are starting to get a lot more interest and trying to make sure that whenever these kinds of opportunities come up to talk to government, that we're out there, that we're pushing policy. And like I said in the past, if you're interested in being in the policy group, then let me know, because we do try our best to connect with government and let people know what we're trying to achieve. I have to say that in New South Wales, we're not as well connected. Clive in Tasmania is super well connected, both in terms of Tasmania and Victoria. So different states have got different levels of engagement, but we're trying really hard to improve that.
Yeah.
So thanks very much, Daryl.
Okay.
So anyone else got their hand up? Otherwise, I'll dominate. Yeah. Mark,
I can talk.
you can help. The floor is yours.
Okay.
Have to talk.
My battery extender, I made a few mods to the control circuitry to make it a bit more safe, and I've run it for just under a month since the last meeting, and didn't have any problems. So it's all on track.
That's in the car and it's operational.
Well, it was. I've taken it out now because I need more room in the car for passengers. But anyway,
Hang on, shuffle a bit towards Michael.
Yeah. The other thing is my charger in my Leaf. So this is a first generation Leaf with a 3.5 kilowatt charger. Died shortly before I started this project, so I had to replace it. I did replace it. I got another charger from some guys in Canberra. I won't tell you their names to protect their privacy, but they're members and they know who they are. So if they want to out themselves, by all means, I have no problem with them outing themselves, but I'm not going to do it myself because, it's their privacy. Anyway.
So it was a second-hand charger.
I bought a second-hand charger for $100, and which I thought was a really reasonable price. I had to talk him up because he was going to offer it to me for 50, and I just thought that was just I wouldn't be able to sleep at night paying 50 for it. So I talked him up.
Software. You interested?
Sorry.
Nothing.
You've got a bridge to sell me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, so I swapped it out. Took me about 1 day, a solid day of work, and worked straight away.
Nice.
So
So with the extender, what's the next step?
the next step is to buy a sample of the batteries that I would intend to do it with long term
permanent
batteries, and ship them in. I'm buying them from the Chinese, simply because they've got the best prices and the best capacity, best size of battery for the money, sort of thing. The density, all the rest of it. So I'll be going that way. The other thing is, though, I've got a whole stack of 18650s, which Jason and I were working on. And so the 18650 approach has since died, but still got all these batteries. So I intend to resurrect them, get them into the game as well.
Popcorn.
And John's been working on the power supply, which I'd like to use with the 18650s. I don't know if John wants to talk about that, but that's about all I've got to say.
All right, well, I'll say something briefly. Yes, I have been working on the power supply. You know, you've got your step up, your step down, you've got your inductors and your FETs and so on. And so far, I've got it to the point where it can drop 300 volts down to about 200 volts at 600 watts, unregulated. But as soon as I start to fiddle with it, the inductor starts to misbehave. And that could be because it's getting mechanical distortions, or because the two coils are sort of sparking because they're too close together and they're developing quite a voltage. So I've decided to bite the bullet and actually purchase a new choke. That'll probably be about $16 or so. But after that, you know, at least that'll be one less unknown. But in a sense, the thing was running quite nicely at 500 or 600 watts, and it does feel like it should be able to get up to 1,000 or more watts with a little bit of luck, I suppose you would say.
So what are you using it for? It's off hanging off the main pack, and you're bringing down the voltage.
Okay, so I'll repeat the story with this. I think I did sort of outline the story at Borkham Hills, but I will repeat that. Now, my understanding, Mark might correct me, is that the Leaf battery pack goes from about 390 volts to 350 volts. Is that correct? Right, 350 volts to 360 volts to 300.
It'll get into 300, but that's like 1% of the time.
Yeah, that's not. But his auxiliary pack goes from 410 volts to 300 volts. So when you hook them up in parallel, and you're basically using the auxiliary pack from 390 to 350 volts, in a sense, you're throwing away half the capacity of the battery pack because you're not using the potential drain that you could get out of it. So the idea of this power supply is that when your main battery pack is at 390 volts and your auxiliary pack is at 410 volts, you drop the voltage from 410 volts to 390 volts and feed it into the car. And basically, depending on the watts coming out of the main pack and the auxiliary pack, there's a few sort of variables there. But eventually, the auxiliary pack will drop below the voltage of the main pack. And then what you want to do is, let's say the auxiliary pack might be at, say, 350 volts. You want to boost that voltage to 360 volts or 370 volts. And obviously, at some point, the main battery pack will hit 350 volts, but then the auxiliary pack can go all the way down to 300 volts and the voltage will be boosted up to that 350, 360 volt range. So in a sense, you're able to use the full range of the auxiliary pack. And the way Mark's using it at the moment, I guess you could say you're probably effectively doubling the output power, but obviously it depends on the exact details of the discharge curves and the energy and so on. But you'll at least get twice the power out of the auxiliary pack and maybe more. And that's the point of the power supply. It's both the energy. Yeah, so it's basically both a drop down and a feed up. And you know, some of the clever things I'm doing in this power supply is I'm using SCRs rather than an H bridge. You know, if you want to dwell on it, basically the nice thing is you don't need an H bridge. 0 volts is common to everything, whether it's the power supply, the auxiliary pack, or the main pack, 0 volts is all in common. So to switch between the different operating modes of the power supply, you just use some SCRs, and that means that you can swap around the power supply. And when you're charging the main pack, it's going to charge between 350 volts and 390 volts, but you can take that voltage and basically boost that voltage up to 410 volts to charge up the auxiliary pack. So you're getting double duty out of it. You're playing some fancy games with the SCRs, because in a regular power supply, you'd have to use fancy H bridges and so on. But here you're making use of the fact that some voltage is in common, and you're just swapping things around a bit. And once your SCRs are firing, you're not going to get backup, because they're basically a pair of diodes. So you're not going to get any current going where it shouldn't go. And the other thing is that a regular power supply has got a decent amount of filtering. But this one, the fact that it's going to be sending pulses between the two batteries doesn't matter. So you're not talking about, in a sense, a constant voltage power supply. You're just talking about something that's just feeding a sequence of bursts of energy between the two batteries. And that means that the power supply is easier to make. If you're actually talking about, let's say, a 1,000 watt power supply that had a relatively constant output voltage, that would be very hard. But we're not talking about there. We're talking about 1,000 watts of pulses going through the system. Right. And the battery codes to that. Anyway, there you go. But anyway, that's most of the story about the power supply. At least that's what I hope it will do. And I have made some progress with it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Sorry, I just jumped in. Just to finish out, I thought I'd run through the current status of the Elise project. Did talk about this last time at the physical meeting, but if you've seen this before, please feel free to leave. If not, this is the Elise project. I've had the Elise for about 18 months. It's been around the AEVA car club in Victoria and Adelaide for since 2010. I spotted it in 2017. It had fallen into disrepair, and I kind of spotted it by Emission. It had dropped off the scene. Found the guy that did own it. Started a conversation with him about what he was going to do with it, because he'd obviously broken it, and he was a mechanical guy, not an electrical guy. Convinced him over an extended period of time to sell it to me, and then figured out, oh my God, I haven't told my wife. And the rest is kind of history. I sold the MR2, which is my EV beforehand, and got the Lotus. And well, there you go. There's the MR2. Sold the MR2 because the wife sort of threatened me a little bit and said I had to. Next page. Got a trailer. Got Mark Taylor. Headed down to Victoria. Packed it on a trailer and brought it home. Then started to pull it apart, because it was converted in 2010 using a Kostov 11-inch motor and a Soliton 1 controller, which are pretty good for the day, but the conversion was rough, I'd say. So we pulled a lot of stuff out to make it, to get all the ugly out, so to speak, which is kind of easy in a thing like a Lotus, because it's an aluminium body with a aluminium chassis with a fiberglass body, so you can take a lot off and get in and access. So we did. Cleaned up in and around the motor. You can see there the Kostov and the starts of the battery pack. And then over Christmas, wired up the battery pack. Well, let's jump a bit forward. Wired up the battery pack, put the Soliton on, made it run. So it's a running driving car at the moment. I've got a problem with the DC to DC, because I unfortunately fried my good DC to DC by being super careless, which is stupid of me. But anyway, so it's pretty much ready to run. The process now is that I got to button it up, get all the fiberglass back because it's off being repaired, take it over to the automotive engineer so I can look at getting it registered. So I'm probably a month away from registration in this form. If I don't do something a little bit crazy, like go off and get it painted, because it's a dull grey and we want to change the colour. So long story short, long story long, whatever. The Lotus is almost ready to run, and I'm getting close to registration. It's just really the final bits and pieces to get it past the automotive engineer and then get it registered. Except for the fact that I did another crazy thing, and I bought the Lotus drivetrain. This is a small drive unit from the front of a Tesla Model S that I bought from Leon over at Lithium Power. Right price, right time. It's been pre-hacked. It's got the open inverter controller already installed, and it's ready to run. It's basically on the bench, and I'm just getting ready to turn it over, make it run, and try and understand how it works, and try and figure out how to get it into the Lotus. I mean, I'm so far down the process with the Lotus in DC mode that I'll finish that and get it registered, just run it as it is for a little bit, whilst I figure out how the Tesla operates, try and figure out how to make it run the way that I want. And the thing that's really holding me up at the moment, not so much in running it, because the open inverter is pretty good. There's a lot of information about the open inverter, and it seems to be pretty well sorted. It's more along the lines that this unit is designed to be in the front of the Model S. So what I physically want to do is put it, reverse it. It'll be backwards, so to speak, in the Lotus. And there's some issues, not so much with cooling, but with the oil pumps that I've got to try and figure out. It'll run quite happily in reverse, but the way that the oil pumps seem to work is it's predominantly supposed to go in one direction and not the other, and I've got to try and figure out if that's going to be a problem. So that's pretty much where I'm at. Almost there, registration for the Lotus, and trying to figure out how this Tesla drive unit runs, and it looks pretty cool, to be completely honest. And the open inverter looks like a pretty nice piece of kit that's pretty well sorted. That's the update on the Lotus. And thank you. And unless there's any other projects or any other business, then I think we will hopefully see you on the 18th of March and or at Borkham Hills. So that will be us signing off.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jamie.
No worries. Talk soon.